Hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion with the Wealth of Nations. So, today I'm going to be going over some of my arguments against the necessity of welfare. It's going to be a debate that I'll be having soon, and this is just for me to practice and hopefully to share some of my arguments with a wider audience. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a very simple one, more of an informative debate, but we're going to be talking about the necessity of welfare. Is it a necessity? Is it not? So, I'll just make my arguments today and like to hear what you think about them. Are they sound? Where are they flawed? And yeah, just to further the discussion on the place of welfare in society today. And if it sounds like I'm reading, it's because I am. I'm just going through whatever I can to. I'll try to um, go off the cuff as best I can and just use the text as prompts. But I will be reading some of it. So, with that said, let's get into it. The fundamental flaw with welfare is the assumption that the government can spend your money better than you can. It is the flaw that you should do good with someone else's money. The other flaw is that supporting people is done by force, rather than through their own initiative and by their own volition. We are taxed to the hilt to pass the money from one pocket to another, and I think a debate could be had in itself whether or not that is moral to do that. I'm going to outline now some of my reasons why welfare is not a necessity. It is fraught with issues that I think need to be discussed. Let me begin. A major flaw in the welfare system is the ability to defraud it. Some recent warts in my own experience have been from a few colleagues of mine, one being a person who had recently traveled to Australia who was eligible for welfare benefits despite having never contributed to the Australian tax system. I think there needs to be more discrimination than there is currently for the system to be sustainable. And a basic discrimination would be that if you have not contributed to the pot, you most certainly must, it's hard to argue that you could be eligible to receive benefits. Another area that's ripe for the rorting is the new NDIS scheme, another government system to provide support to the disabled. Something I once again agree with, but what is the cost? What is happening? Now, in particular, the NDIS was recently found to be being defrauded by a group of people, a crime syndicate that leached $2.6 million from people who needed it more. With that money, they bought high class sports cars. And when they were caught, the police said this that it unfortunately was not an isolated case. So this is happening. Wherever there is systems like this, it seems there are people who will take advantage. People who will do the wrong thing. And that suggests a flaw in the fundamentals of the very system of giving money from one person to another. Other instances of welfare fraud are quite staggering. Between 2008 and 2009, the top two benefit types that were defrauded were the New Start program and the single parent payment. For these two types, there were 2,225 convictions. The debts associated with these convictions amount to $33 million for that year alone. Allow me to illustrate how welfare fraud is perpetrated for the single parent payment. Here's a case report. On the 18th of June 2008, 35-year-old Purdy McGee was given an effective sentence of 2 years imprisonment in the Brisbane District Court after pleading guilty to receiving $89,238.88 in Centrelink benefits to which she was not entitled. Between 2011 and January 2016, McGee lied to the Department of Human Services, claiming she was single when she was in a de facto relationship with Andrew Mitchell the entire time. Not only did she lie about this relationship and failed to disclose Mitchell's income, over the 5 years and 6 months, McGee fraudulently claimed benefits. She had 3 children with Mitchell. This offending saw McGee receive $19,589.47 in New Start allowance and $66,123 in the parenting payments, single parenting payments system. In addition, McGee claimed that she had undertaken study when she hadn't, which saw her receive $3,525 in the pensioner education supplement. McGee lied to Centrelink about her circumstances on a number of occasions in order to perpetuate the fraud, including claiming at one stage that she had separated from Mitchell and that he was living elsewhere, when in fact they were living together and held a joint lease on the property. You might have the question in your mind, how much does Australia actually pay in welfare? And the numbers are quite staggering. The projected amount of spending for 2018 and 2019 is $175.97 billion, a significant amount. The welfare safety net, as it is often called, is an apt analogy, but not for the reasons most people associate it with. For some, the welfare safety net catches them before they fall too far, they spring up and back into action. But there are others for whom the welfare safety net is more like a fishnet. A fishnet that once you get in, it is almost impossible to get out without drastic intervention. It's not only the present generation that become ensnared by the net of welfare, subsequent generations get trapped as well. I quote from a study: Mother's welfare dependencies appears to increase the welfare dependency of young women exposed to welfare at home. In another study from Sweden, 43% of individuals receiving social assistance in 1982 and 1983 were raised in families that had received assistance during the 1953 and 1972 period. Welfare tends to ensnare the most vulnerable in society. African Americans are overrepresented on welfare in the United States, women I mentioned earlier, and refugees. Take the case in point of refugees in Australia. If you look at the data, you can see that between a 1, 3, and 5 year period, the number of refugees that are able to get off welfare in that time is very small. $2.1 billion is spent on supporting Aboriginal people, something that I fully support. But they are another vulnerable group in society, and we must look at the result of this funding. Are we seeing progress in Close the Gap initiatives? In some areas we are, that's true, but in most areas we are not. Australia is off track for life expectancy, child mortality rates, employment, reading and numeracy, and school attendance. I've yet to see a problem be solved simply by throwing money at it, which to me seems to be the culture of the government. I was encouraged to see Australia's wade into the I was discouraged to see in Australia as it waded into the waters of intergenerational welfare dependency. They rejected using such terms. They decided a more neutral term to use would be entrenched disadvantage. The change was made because dependency suggests an element of individual fault. Whether you are intergenerationally welfare dependent or experiencing entrenched disadvantage, either way you are stuck, and that is the bottom line. Whatever we want to call it, if we want to play word games with it all, the bottom line, people are stuck. People aren't able to move forward. We have to look to the very mechanism that is supposed to liberate, that is supposed to support, when in reality for many people it is the cause of suffering, the cause of poverty for many. Playing word games, shifting responsibility is the mentality of the welfare state, a state that sees its citizens as children, not as adults able to care for themselves, care for their families. The welfare state is the great enemy to freedom. Despite their language manipulation, the report gave little hope for a brighter future for those dependent on welfare. We must also address the issue of the government's inability to administer its own programs. The government clearly has an interest in reducing welfare costs. In an effort to recoup funds from recipients they paid too much to, there was a robot, kind of an automated system that they initiated to recover some funds. The initial blunder was in the incorrect distribution of funds, so they can't even distribute it. But the second blunder is trying to get the money back, and the reports and headlines were out there of the people who were told that they owed money to the government when they didn't, and it's a serious issue. The system is extremely flawed. Now, welfare tends to balloon. In relation to costs, for example, in the National Academy's Press, it summarized succinctly how welfare begins and how it ends, how it blows out from its original origins. Referring to the Aid to Families with Dependent Children, the AFDC program was created by the Social Security Act in 1935. It originally provided benefits primarily to poor widows, but in the 1960s its caseload shifted towards benefit provision to poor divorced and separated women with children, and has more recently shifted towards poor, never married women who have had out-of-wedlock births. I would like to present to you an alternative to the welfare state where individuals are responsible to manage their own affairs and solve their own problems. I will use the example of a man that has become an acquaintance of mine, that I hope I will have the pleasure of calling a friend in the future. He was told by the government that getting fresh water to his outback community would cost $500,000 and that it couldn't justify it. Instead, they slapped signage on the water saying not to drink it and encouraged the man's family to move to Meekatharra, a community plagued by drug and alcohol problems. He came up with a plan to deliver fresh water at the cost of $26,000. He started a GoFundMe campaign and had great support from the wider community, raising the funds he needed to get a start. He delivered fresh water to his community through private charity and his own efforts. This empowered man, free from the mental and physical restraints of welfare, said this recently, quote, "In the last week, I've had so much going on, it's made my head spin. I've had the Deputy General for Communities and Minister for Child Protection visit my little fish farm, and we're very interested in supporting the growth of the proposed annual Barramundi Festival. Yesterday, Arvo, I got a call from Lotteries West to come for a visit next week and see how they can help with funding it. Had a call from Rio Tinto asking me to submit designs for next year's NAIDOC Week shirts. I smile as I read a separation certificate from my previous employer to help get on the dole. No thanks. I've literally got bigger fish to fry. I told you young fellas that hard work and a little sacrifice at the start is needed. Now none of you are involved in any way because you let a white woman decide what is good for you." Now, when he was asked about his comments on the white women, he said this: "They took all my workers away to keep them in a welfare state." Close quote. Now, it is important that we change the current system. Welfare is not a necessity. It is a means by which people are disempowered. My friend said this, quote, "We are not looking for a handout. We just want this hand up, and we'll make everyone proud." Close quote. Give people the dignity, the decency to give them a hand up, that they might have a chance to put their future in their own hands and not in the hands of the government.